is, what it is, what it isn't. Looking for a better way to get up out of bed instead of getting on the internet and checking a new hit. Me get up. First shot, hip strut walk.
Hi guys, so we are here with Daniel Velardo, McCluskey House Leader at SPC. And it is currently Are You OK week. We had Are You OK Day on Thursday. And a big part of mental health is the diet. So one of the big topics was eating disorders, which people experience. However, diet is such a key part to, keeping mentally healthy and, just staying positive and the energy flowing through the body. So I'm going to ask Mr. Velardo a couple questions as he is more of an expert than I am. And so I'm going to get straight into it. So we understand that saturated fats were thought to be an issue and companies have created low-fat foods. However, evidence is suggesting that saturated fat isn't the problem. Can you elaborate more on this?
Yeah, sure, Connor. So saturated fat has been demonized ever since Ansel Keys' landmark 7-country study in 1970. The study was flawed and his findings were biased. Based on his study, the dietary guidelines were created in 1977 and a low-fat trend was born. As a result, food companies were asked to remove the fat from foods, which they did. However, the implication was that the food no longer tasted good. So what they did because of this was they added sugar to the food to increase the taste. What have we seen as a result of this movement? An obesity epidemic and increasing numbers of type 2 diabetes. So with these guidelines, we saw the intake of animal fats such as red meat, eggs, and dairy was reduced. We saw the low-fat food products flooded the market. We saw an intake of ultra-processed foods. We saw an increase in the use of vegetable oils, and we also saw takeaway food becoming more popular. So natural saturated fat is essential to our health, and there are several studies that have proven there is no correlation between natural saturated fat and heart disease. Natural saturated fat can be found in foods like unprocessed meat, full-fat dairy, nuts, eggs, cream, and olive oil.
So looking at that, we can tell that they got it quite wrong in the end. And, as the research has developed, we find out that fats aren't really the issue. And it's really interesting for anyone out there. You'll probably go down in the pantry and you'll find, low fat, and you think it's okay, but in the end, fat isn't the issue. It's the added sugar. So that's something everyone needs to be aware of. So the second question I have is what are the issues around processed and sugary foods that people aren't really aware of?
Yeah, so processed foods are products that contain several manufactured ingredients, including natural and artificial flavors or colors, sweeteners, preservatives, and other additives. So some examples include mass-produced soft drinks, sweet or savory packaged snacks, packaged baked goods, chicken or fish nuggets, and other packaged meat products, instant noodles and soups. Sugar. So the issue with sugar is it offers no nutritional benefit to the body. So sugar has been found to be as addictive as tobacco and cocaine and has similar effects on the brain as drugs in terms of addiction. So you may notice when you consume sugary foods that you keep wanting more. A few issues with sugar are, highlighted by certain statistics, and some statistics that I'll provide for you here are quite alarming. So, 1 in 3 of all humans are now either overweight or obese. 1 in 4 children are overweight or obese. It is projected that by 2025, around 83% of Australian men and 75% of women aged 20 years and over will be overweight or obese, as well as 1/3 of 5 to 19-year-olds. More than 50% of children have tooth decay. Currently, the statistic is 280 Australians develop diabetes every day. So that's one person every 5 minutes. And an impact on this for our health system is it's costing Australia $14.6 billion per year to try and treat type 2 diabetes, which essentially is a dietary disease. So if it's a dietary disease, I'd like to think that there is a dietary prevention and cure for that.
Yeah, it's you look at the statistics and it's amazing. I think the average intake is supposed to be 6 teaspoons of sugar a day, and you can go look at your $1 large frozen Coke down at McDonald's and that has 25 teaspoons of sugar. So like all these things just add up over time. And obviously as the statistics show, it's getting worse and worse, and change needs to be made, and, you know, people need to be aware.
Correct. So as you just mentioned there, so the World Health Organization does recommend no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. If you just think about how seriously the world has taken the recommendations from the World Health Organization regarding the COVID-19, but yet this recommendation has been in place for numerous years now, and governments and countries aren't paying attention to it. So it's hopefully people will start to realize the impact of sugar and the reason why we need to be consuming less than 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. So just another stat with that. I'm not sure on the exact updated numbers. However, I know adults are consuming more than 20 teaspoons on average in Australia, and teenagers 38 teaspoons per day. So it is quite alarming, and hence the reason why the obesity epidemic and type 2 diabetes is increasing.
Yeah, I mean, you even go down the supermarket and you see the cheap foods and people will buy them, but they're just full of added sugar. And if it doesn't say sugar, you know, they'll put something else in it that's just as bad. So it's terrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
In regard to food health star ratings, they've seemed to get it so wrong, you know, with Milo being given a 4-star health rating, for an example. What do you have to say about this, and how would you suggest people clearly distinguish good foods from the store?
Yeah, so the house star rating system is flawed, and the reason it is flawed is because it's voluntary. So that means it's not mandated, meaning that companies can choose whether to include it on their products. So what incentive do companies have to include a low rating on their product when they're trying to make money and sell the product? So it would be great to see food labeling change with the introduction of a traffic light system, and that can be added to the front of packages that clearly shows how much added sugar a product contains. So this could be broken into green, amber, and red, and we can have, you know, cubes of sugar, or we can have teaspoons of sugar that clearly demonstrate for the consumer what is within that product. Some other things that we can pay attention to is if you actually check the ingredient list on the back, and as you mentioned before, there are, you know, certain different names. There's actually more than 61 different names that sugar can fall under. So if you find that sugar is in one of the first 4 ingredients in that ingredient list, it's probably best that you leave that on the shelf and we don't purchase that product. So the way ingredients are listed is from their greatest volume to the least within a product. So that means the first product is a product so the first ingredient is the ingredient that is the most in that product, then the second, third, and fourth, and so on. So if sugar is in the top 4, definitely would be leaving that on the shelf and look for another product.
So that's a tip for everyone out there. Make sure you don't look at the health star rating and you're checking the ingredients on the back. Diet is such an important component to health, as we've mentioned before. And in changing diet, people recommend that we should eat what they consider whole foods. But what does whole foods really mean?
So whole foods are real foods that have not been modified. So some examples include fresh fruit and vegetables, meat, eggs, milk, and cheese. When we mention whole foods, it's important to ask how the food was created. So if it comes in a box like cereal, for example, it has been processed. So if a food contains an ingredient list with many items and numbers, it's highly processed. Whole foods such as fresh fruit and veg do not contain an ingredient list. So if you need to ask yourself, how was this food created? Alarm bells should be ringing immediately. Whole foods are nutrient dense and very healthy for you.
Well, I think that says it for itself, you know. If it has no ingredient list, then it's a pretty good food. And unfortunately, the foods people choose are full of ingredients. So,
Yep.
What are some potential benefits that someone of our age as a student in high school who makes a change in their diet could see and or feel?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say just someone your age. It's for every individual. And there's many benefits to an improved diet and critically the reduction in sugar consumption. So many studies have shown that significantly decreasing sugar consumption will have the following health benefits. And that is an increased energy level, increased weight management, enhanced mood, mental clarity and focus, reduced inflammation, improved sleep patterns. So there's a number of benefits that can be happen from, from the health side of things to your mental health as well. So plenty of categories that can be ticked here.
I think that last one is really important. People at school struggle with sleep. They might stay up too late, or they're feeling tired during the day. And that does actually also come down to diet and sugar, as you mentioned. So it's important to consider what you're putting into your body because it all adds up in the end.
Correct. And as you mentioned there, so with sugar, one of the issues is when we have it, we get a quick spike in our insulin, and we're often feeling hungry. So you might have a food that potentially is high in sugar, and then you want to eat again in an hour or two. So it's not filling. Whereas if you're having, back to your question before, as you mentioned, whole foods, another great thing about whole foods is because it is nutrient dense, it is very filling, and it helps with our appetite. So we're not constantly wanting food and wanting that sugar hit.
Yeah. So what would you say are your 3 tips, or what you would suggest to a student, or as you mentioned before, anyone, if they're looking to improve their diet?
Yep. So a couple of things. Probably there's the first principle that I live by, and that's called JERF, JERF, and that just stands for just eat real food. So if the product is a real food, then it gets a tick. The second thing was, just as I mentioned before, checking the ingredients. So if sugar is listed in the first 4 ingredients on a product, definitely leave it on the shelf and look for an alternative product. And probably the third tip kind of would be sleep. So ensuring that you get enough sleep, and sleep has numerous benefits, but one of the other things that probably people don't realize is there have been a number of studies that have clearly demonstrated that when we are tired, we make poor nutritional choices. And this technique tends to lead to sugary products. So definitely increasing your sleep has many benefits, and one of them is a nutritional level as well.
So I just wanted to quickly ask you, people, like, they have a decent breakfast. They might have Wheat Bix, which is a good option. Sometimes they have the sugary cereals, which they need to stay away from. But it's really the snacking food. So I want to just quickly ask you, what are your 3 top snack foods to go to that, doesn't contain much sugar and is good to keep you full?
Yep, so nuts are fantastic. They're probably number one, easy to carry around, don't need to be refrigerated, and they're full of nutrients. So they're definitely number one. I'd say cheese is excellent as well. Again, it fills you up, got some fantastic nutrients within it. Boiled eggs is another easy solution to carry around with you. Fresh fruit, veggies, all these can be taken with you, and don't need refrigeration as well.
Awesome. So I think what we're going to do is we'll put up a list of, good foods to eat from breakfast through to dinner, including snacks for all you guys out there to consider in your diets. But I'd like to thank you, Mr. Velardo, for your time and your expertise here today. And we hope to see a change created in the near future.
All right, Connor, and thanks for the work that you're doing with the SLG group, and well done on your initiatives this year. You're doing a fantastic job, and we are in the middle of trying to get a display happening at school, and hopefully when we get back to school with the end of COVID, we will get that up and running for people to have a look at.
Yeah, exactly. Put it in sight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.